Well, it's freezing cold and I'm on the top of Cwm Cerwyn at about 530 metres, the highest point in Pembrokeshire and the Preseli Mountains. It's pretty cold at the end of that storm that we've been enduring over the weekend. There's quite a bit of snow on the ground, as you can see, and as if we look out to sea over that way, we can see pretty rough and choppy waters, although it's now starting to snow again, so it's a bit misty. I've had a bit of time for doing some reflection while I've been walking up here today, and marvelling at the flocks of redwings and fieldfares that are all about the hills here. They'll be stripping the berries off anything they can find, having just flown all the way here from Scandinavia, which is pretty remarkable. 1,000 kilometres in fairly horrendous weather, and probably tells you something about how cold it is there that they've chosen to come here to have a better winter than they would have had at home. You'll hear the redwings possibly while I'm filming. You might even hear them around Stroud and Cotswolds at the moment, because they're often flying at night, making a kind of weird ethereal seeping sort of noise, quite similar actually to swifts. So they aren't swifts, you can hear their redwings. So I've been thinking a bit about migration because of that journey and all that means, and reflecting that when I was a little lad walking around King Stanley, often looking up at houses and seeing the house martins and thinking about the thousands and thousands of kilometres they come to spend their summers hereabouts. And I'm conscious that a few times recently I've looked at some of the same buildings and there's no house martin nests anymore, but there is wire mesh under the eaves where the house martins used to be. And I kind of wonder what it was like for those first house martins as they flew back from Africa and found that their old home had been blocked up by a homeowner, obviously keen to preserve their home, but perhaps at the expense of the birds. So when I think of that, it's one of those sort of thousands of little ecocides that we probably all do absent-mindedly without really thinking about the consequences for our fellow creatures. And I suppose I'm really glad to be out today, believe it or not, because I really enjoy this bit of winter when the first migrants arrive from the north. Having had probably 2 months of the migrants that have flown to the south having gone, so we've kind of had a bit of a paucity of birds around, but suddenly now we've got lots, and might see big flocks of starlings as I go back down the mountain as well. I've noticed quite a few big sort of potential murmurations as I was driving up here today. And I suppose I was kind of thinking that there's probably many a red-faced armchair politician in a pub somewhere, very angry that we have no idea where all these migrants have come from, or quite where they're going, or quite how many are here. And that, of course, made me think more about migration generally and about the devastating tragedies, tragic stories of people trying to reach our country whose lives have been cut short through their efforts to have a safer and better life for them and their families. And I suppose for me that talk of migration, which when I was young was something that we talked about positively, and now hearing migration and even the concept of being a refugee or an asylum seeker being spoken of in a really negative way, and I find that really distressing that we've turned words into pejorative terms when really all we should be doing is reaching out with compassion. So we've heard particular tragic stories this week of people who've died trying to get across the sea, and I think the sea temperature at the moment is about 6 degrees, which is excruciatingly cold, and I can't even imagine the desperation that you'd need to be in to think about going anywhere near that water at this time of year. And then I think about Advent and the Advent story and the story of God's relationship with his people over time, which throughout the Old Testament and in the beginning of the New Testament, in the Christmas story, are stories of migration, of dispersal, of political upheaval, of civil unrest, of persecution, and people needing to find safety. So I don't know how to resolve any of these foreign policy, diplomatic, political type issues, but I do know that just like my fascination with the migratory birds and the science and the stories of their journeys, that these things will be easier to resolve if we try to understand them rather than simply putting up barriers. And I think the other thing I know most of all is that I don't think there's a single problem ever that hasn't been improved by the really systematic application of compassion, and I pray that that is what we're able to do as we think about people who have really endured the most awful stories, the most awful suffering, and who are trying to make life safer for themselves and their families.